Hey everyone. So to continue with the Atlantic Division, we have the Toronto Maple Leafs. They currently have 30 points, 13 wins, 12 losses, and 4 overtime losses. Matthews currently leads them with 31 points on the team, and I believe he leads them in goal scoring as well. Toronto has been a huge head scratcher for me, and going over the past couple of years when I think about Toronto, I I see so much offense, and I see this powerhouse of a team that they can be and have shown plenty of flashes of, but defensively they've just been lacking for so long, and has been ultimately their problem up until this point still. And you have Matthews, obviously, who's a bona fide goal scorer. You can expect a lot from him night in and night out. He has had his stretches of inconsistency, but I also feel that once Mitch Marner is back for the Leafs, that'll help them. They have so many young pieces in their offensive group, so many young talented pieces. If you just put those two aside, then you also have guys like Kasperi Kapanen, Andreas Janssen, and all these others, and Ilya Mikheyev, who came over from Russia this year to play with them, has played pretty well to start the year. I think he has at least 15 points to start the season for them. He's been very solid at times. John Tavares has had a slow start to the season, got hurt, and was slow for a bit, but he's starting to pick up the pace lately. He scored in multiple times within his last couple of games, so that's good for them. And Alex Kerfoot has been solid for them, even though I think he was injured, or at least I know that he served a couple of game suspension for them. Obviously, Kerfoot was part of the big trade between Colorado and Toronto that sent Tyson Barrie to Toronto along with Kerfoot in exchange for Nazem Kadri. So, and I think it was Nazem Kadri, Callie Rosen, and I'm sure there were some picks involved too. But all those pieces has helped Toronto, kind of. When I think about defensively, Morgan Riley, you can expect to get a lot of points out of. He's had a strong start to the season. Slow lately, but that's also been during Toronto's skid because, as we know, Toronto was lost 6 straight, and then they fired Mike Babcock, and all these things coming out with Mike Babcock now, which is really interesting. But then Sheldon Keefe was brought up from the Toronto Marlies. Been a huge advocate for him for a while now. I love the things that he's been doing with Toronto. He looks like he's so great when it comes to young talent and developing them. I'm sure he's going to do great things with Toronto. But as you can see, Toronto still has that inconsistency, and it goes back to their defense, because if I'm Toronto and if I'm their GM, if I'm Kyle Dubas, I would not have made that move for Tyson Barrie. I know that Tyson has been picking up the pace lately, especially since he's been given more opportunity on the top defensive lines for the Maple Leafs, and as the power play quarterback, given more time since Keefe became head coach. But overall, Barrie is most likely not going to hit 60-plus points like he did last season. And he's an offensive-minded defenseman. And what has Toronto's biggest problem been for numerous years? Defense. And they're not giving Freddie Anderson any benefit of doubt night in and night out. And it's truly showing. I think Freddie is an awesome goaltender. I think he's been solid this year. But I think that they need a little bit more out of him too. And like the Montreal Canadiens, Toronto has that other problem. They don't have a backup goalie at all. Michael Hutchinson is a borderline backup. He's really strictly an AHL starter, and he's been their backup. They sent him down. They called up a couple other guys too, but they didn't really get the job done. And Toronto is really struggling in that goaltending area. And you have fans blaming Hutchinson for every time they lose. But then if you look at plenty of times that Toronto's lost, like last night, for example, they lose to Philly 6-1. It doesn't, at the end of the day, the goalies do matter, but how you play from them obviously means more than anything. So like I said, there are so many pieces on this Toronto team. I do think they will pick up the pace. I expect them to make playoffs, but I don't see how they become a cup contender by any means unless they make smart moves defensively and they also get a solidified backup, a goalie that can actually help them and take a lot of the load off of Freddie Anderson, because they have overworked Freddie extremely since he first came into Toronto. And it's going to be a situation like you see with Carey Price, and sooner rather than later with Marc-Andre Fleury in Vegas, where they're going to be getting so overworked, and it's going to get to the point where they're going to get really gassed, and it's going to be hurting them, and then you're not going to get the 100% out of that goalie as you would hope you'd be getting. So Toronto, I do think will make playoffs, but they have fixing to do because it has been very alarming, their play. I feel like they need a shakeup, and I know that they have that with Sheldon Keefe, but I think that more needs to be in play as well. Um, their scoring is just inconsistent. They have a lot of egos on that team, in my opinion, and they're still such a young group, and I think people forget that. This is a very young Toronto team overall, and it makes sense for them to have some of the hiccups they have. And you also think about William Nylander, too. I forgot about him a second ago. He's been solid for them this year, too. I think he has at least 20 points. But overall, they need to find that consistency like a lot of these other teams. But defensively, more than anything, their defense has just been atrocious. It's been since Matthews came on the team, Nylander, all of them. It's like they front-loaded their offense, but instead of addressing the defense, they just made things worse. They got a guy like Tyson Barrie who really isn't needed. With how lethal this offense can be when everything is clicking, stick with just Morgan Riley. It just really did not make sense to me, and Colorado has far and away won that trade to this rate at least. So that being said, after Toronto, we have the Tampa Bay Lightning, which is the biggest shock to start the season in regards to their placement in the standings. They have 29 points. They have 13 wins, 9 losses, 3 overtime losses. Kucherov leads the team with 30 points. He's finally been picking up the pace after having a slow start to the season. Kevin Shattenkirk, who Tampa signed after my favorite team, the New York Rangers, decided to buy him out, and he has been thriving since coming to Tampa. He has big chip on his shoulder, obviously, and he's proving that he can still be an effective offensive defenseman in this league. With 20 points, has really helped them out on the power play and has been eating a lot of minutes defensively, being paired on their top line plenty of times with the likes of Victor Hedman, who is flat out amazing when healthy. Victor Hedman is, in my mind, the best defenseman in the league. So much better than some other defensemen that I will eventually talk about, like Brent Burns and Erik Karlssons and all those, Drew Doughty, all of them, because Hedman contributes offensively very well, but he's so good in his own end. And I feel like, especially when it comes to defensemen, that's what needs to be recognized the most. Seeing what John Carlson is doing with the Capitals, he has been killing it offensively. But if you look what he does in his own end, it all makes sense for him to win the Norris this season because of just how well he's been. It bothers me personally seeing these offensive-minded defensemen win Norris trophies year in and year out because I think it matters so much more than just point production. So Hedman, love to see it, that he's been playing good since coming back from injury. Shattenkirk's been very solid for them. Offensively, Braden Point has had another good start to the season. We'll see what he brings because he's going to be really interesting when his contract's up, how elite of a player he's going to be because he had a monster year last year. We'll see if he can keep that up. Then they have all their other forwards. They have Tyler Johnson, Andre Palat, Anthony Cirelli, all these guys, Yanni Gord, Pat Maroon. They've all been solid for them this season. They really have. But it just feels like there's something lost with this Tampa team, and I really can't pinpoint what it is. And Steven Stamkos, too, Stammer, has had a decent start to the season. But I think as long as Tampa has Stamkos on their team, unfortunately, they're not going to win anything. And I know that might seem absurd for me to say, but Stammers has been statistically one of those guys that just has not stepped up to the plate in the playoffs. You could say the same thing about Kucherov last year, but that went for every player. But Stamkos especially, I don't know how great of a leader he is. He's a fantastic player, a generational talent. But at the end of the day, he's already at the point where he's hit his prime, and I think regression is going to start showing this season and going forward. Not saying he's going to regress and be an average player. I think he will always be above average, but I don't think that we are going to see the Steven Stamkos that we've seen over pretty much his whole career. I think that is getting to a point where he's going to start slowing down, and you're going to see him have more of along the range of 60, 75 point seasons. So we'll see. I could be completely wrong, but that's just my opinion. Tampa's tough. I do think they will make playoffs. I definitely do. I think that they are going to turn around, and they have been picking up the pace lately, but I think it's John Cooper, their head coach, and the the way that he approaches this team, I'm not sure it's best for them. I personally feel they need to shake up because when I watch Tampa, and even when they're dominant, they're dominant based on solely their skill in the way that Toronto is too. But it does. There's just there's just something that isn't there. I like the willingness to win. I just don't see it with this group personally. I don't see the drive that I see with other contending teams that I've seen, not just this season, but in seasons prior. There's just something missing in Tampa, and I'm not sure what the answer is. I think that obviously having depth scoring and depth defensively, depth anywhere helps, but yeah, all of that considered, and then you also talk about their goaltending because Andre Vasilevsky hasn't had a great start to the season, which is kind of odd to see, but he is very young and he has an amazing track record up until this point. So I will give him the benefit of the doubt that I'm sure that he will turn things around. And Curtis McElhinney has been solid for them, solid backup, but Tampa is another team where they overuse Vasilevsky a lot, but they really shouldn't because as long as this team is clicking on all cylinders, they can handle having a decent backup, maybe not as good as other teams because of just how star-studded this Tampa Bay team is overall. So with that being said, I do think Tampa Bay will make playoffs. So after Tampa, we have the Ottawa Senators with 23 points, 11 wins, 16 losses, and 1 overtime loss. Pajot currently leads them with 15 goals, and he's been killing it for them. I can definitely see Pajot getting traded by the deadline because the Senators are not making playoffs. They're not going anywhere. They have no expectations, and they don't have any expectations for a good while because they're in a complete rebuild mode, and that's okay. I feel bad for Ottawa Senators fans that they have to go through this, and their management, their ownership has been dreadful from every single trade that they've done with getting rid of star players, whether it be Mark Stone, Mike Hoffman, Erik Karlsson, etc. They have done it so poorly. But I'm hoping that for their sake, things are starting to turn in the right direction. And I must say, Ottawa has been a very pesky team this season. They haven't been great away, but especially at home, they seem to have a very different mentality. And they are a very annoying team to play against that I've witnessed. They can be on you constantly, and reality is going to hit them. And they lost 5-2 yesterday in Vancouver. But overall, they have a lot of guys who, they don't have any studs on that team. Besides, you could say Thomas Chabot on defense, and offensively, their most coveted winger, overall forward is Brady Tkachuk, who's had a really strong start to his sophomore year. But overall, I just don't see a whole lot there at all. Anthony Duclair has been solid for them, 10 goals at least, so that's nice to see. I hope that he picks it up and takes advantage of being in a top 6 role with this Ottawa team. Vladislav Nemestikov, same type of thing, hope for his sake that he continues to take advantage. Connor Brown from Toronto. Then you have, obviously, Logan Brown and Colin White and these guys that Senators have thought highly of in regards to them being in the prospect pool. Now, hopefully things start turning. Same with Eric Brandstrom on defense, who came in the Mark Stone trade. Highly coveted defenseman with a lot of offensive upside, but has yet to really show that at the NHL level. So Ottawa's not making playoffs. There's no question there, but I do like the direction that they are going in. I really like their head coach a lot, DJ Smith, who was the assistant from Toronto. I think that he's really approached them and this overall team very well. I think he's brought a different mentality to this team, and I think that they are taking advantage of the fact that with having such low expectations, I think takes so much weight off these players' shoulders and just gives them an opportunity to try to have as much fun as they can. And with fun comes good things, and good things ultimately will lead to wins. So Ottawa, I do see them as a team that will be one of the worst in the league, but at this rate, definitely not the worst, and they have played much better than expected to not just me, but I would say the majority of the hockey community overall. So to finish out with the Atlantic Division, we have the Detroit Red Wings. They have 17 points, 7 wins, 20 losses, 3 overtime losses. Wow. Detroit has been terrible. Talk about a full rebuild. They're another example of that. Anthony Mantha was on a hot start to the season for them with 12 goals. Then he got hurt. their top line looks pretty nice when you think about Anthony Mantha, centered by Dylan Larkin, who's been decent this season. He has around 18 points, but I know that Red Wings fans expect more from him, and rightfully so. And then Tyler Bertuzzi has done really well for them. He leads the team in points. I'm pretty sure. I think he has like between 22 and 24. And defensively, they have some young pieces there. Hronek has been solid for them with 13 points. Has helped on the power play, I believe. And they have these pieces, Robbie Fabry too, that they got in trade with St. Louis for De La Rose. And I think that was a perfect trade for them because Fabry wasn't getting any opportunities with the stacked St. Louis Blues team. And coming off of his serious, I think he had knee surgery, a lot of people were thinking, well, that's pretty much it for him. He'll probably just be a bona fide AHLer. But he's proving that he still has plenty of scoring and that his ceiling is still much higher than maybe what a lot of people thought up until this point. So Fabry's been doing really well for them since being traded over from St. Louis. They have pieces there. Athanasiou has really always opened my eyes. One of the fastest players in the league, without question. I know from watching games, seeing him play, especially against the Rangers, he's up and down the ice constantly, and there's no catching up to him when it comes to that. But obviously, this team is in a full rebuild. They have no chance of making playoffs. The winning streak they would have to go on just to get to 500 is ridiculous. For their sake, I hope that they get the first overall pick this year because they would definitely need it. They need a top young player, and especially in this year's draft, the 2020 draft, because it's arguably the most coveted draft in NHL history. And Detroit has a very good prospect pool too, with the likes of Philip Zadina, who's been getting more playing time lately due to Anthony Mantha's injury and other things. I know that Zadina got his first NHL point a couple of nights ago, so that's good for him. We'll see what the future holds for the Red Wings, but as of right now, they aren't going anywhere. So, with that being said, those are my thoughts on the Atlantic Division overall. Next, I will be talking about one of the divisions in the West that is yet to be seen. I don't know which one I'm going to pick yet, but I will be coming up with that within a day or two. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please like, subscribe, and drop a comment. If you're a fan of any of these teams, please give your input on what I said. And if you agree, disagree, maybe some things that I missed from being an overall hockey fan. And thank you again so much. And I will talk to you guys again soon.